My husband drugged me to induce a miscarriage so he could get back with his first love, not knowing the baby was his only chance at survival. Just after announcing my pregnancy, my mother-in-law thoughtfully made chicken soup to nourish me. But soon after drinking it, I began to suffer abdominal pain and bleeding. I gritted my teeth and urged my husband and mother-in-law to call an ambulance, but she calmly said, "No need. I gave you enough abortion medicine, not even a great immortal could save this child now." I couldn't understand why my mother-in-law would do such a thing. After pressing repeatedly, my husband impatiently spoke up. "My true love is back. She can accept a divorce but not that I have a child." My mother-in-law promptly produced a divorce agreement, coercing me to sign it with threats and bribes. Only after I signed did they allow me to go to the hospital. But I wasn't overly upset. First, I never really liked children. Second, the person who would die without umbilical cord blood wasn't me anyway. Under my mother-in-law Pearl's expectant gaze, I reluctantly drank 3 full bowls of greasy chicken soup. "Mom, I really can't drink anymore. You two can have the rest." My husband Derek smiled, "That won't do. This is the soup I specially had Mom make for you. How could we drink it?" As Derek ladled more soup for me, he said, "By the way, you just said you have good news and even better news. One is the pregnancy, what's the other?" I lowered my gaze. Being pregnant was only a piece of good news. The better news was that Derek had a chance of survival. But before I could speak, a sharp pain in my abdomen interrupted me. It was a sensation I had never felt before, as if an excavator was wildly digging inside my lower belly. Within less than a minute, the pain was so intense that I rolled off the chair, drenched in sweat, while warm blood seemed to flow from below. Pearl and Derek just stood calmly on the side watching. I didn't have time to think. "Mom, Derek, call an ambulance quickly. My stomach hurts so much. We have to get to the hospital to save this child." Only then, but before I could finish, Pearl shot me a cold look. "No need. I gave you enough abortion pills. Not even a great God could save this child now." I was stunned instantly. No wonder the two of them refused to drink chicken soup earlier. No wonder they were so calm when they saw me in pain. I didn't understand why. I turned to Derek. "Derek," his expression grew even more impatient, "my first love, Scarlet, is back. She's still single and still loves me. But she's a kind and moral girl. She doesn't want to destroy our marriage. I had planned to divorce you first and then marry her, but you got pregnant. I know very well she can accept a divorce but not a child. So this child can't be kept." By now, the pain in my abdomen had eased considerably, but I knew clearly the child was lost. I felt bitterly ironic and wanted to speak about the importance of this child, to see them regret it, but I feared they might lash out at me in anger. So I twisted my words at the last moment. "I won't cling on. We can get a divorce. Just call an ambulance for me immediately. If anything happens to me." Pearl showed a smile. "Don't worry, Derek and I are kind people. We would never put your life in danger. Although I gave you quite a bit of medicine, it won't cause any serious harm to your body or life. It will just cause you to miscarry and have abdominal pain." Derek nodded. "Yeah, besides, if this child is mine, I have the right to keep it or not. If the child isn't mine, that means you've been cheating on me, so I have even more right to get rid of this bastard." I was so furious at Derek and Pearl's attitude that I almost spat blood. "If you don't want the child, you could have just said so directly. I could accept an abortion and then a divorce. But what right do you have to drug me? Do you even know that what you're doing is illegal?" Derek and Pearl exchanged a glance and both laughed, Derek especially hard, laughing as he said in broken sentences, "You're talking to me about the law? Who told me during our blind date that they planned to be child-free? You tricked me into marriage, isn't that illegal?" Pearl nodded in agreement. "Right, that's called marriage fraud. I've seen it on the news." With Pearl's backing, Derek became even more self-righteous. "And you got pregnant with my child without my consent, forcing me to spend my life with you. Isn't that illegal? Seeing that I remained silent, Pearl quickly pulled out a pre-prepared divorce agreement from the drawer. Sign this, and we'll let you go to the hospital, otherwise. I wanted to sign immediately, but a sharp pain struck my abdomen again. Seeing me like this, Pearl rolled her eyes repeatedly. What are you pretending for? How painful can a miscarriage be? I'm telling you, this divorce agreement is really generous. We're giving up the house and the car, and all the savings at home will be yours. Basically, Derek is walking away with nothing. So don't act like you're not satisfied. I rolled my eyes inwardly. Ridiculous. The house and car were my premarital property to begin with. How could they just give them to me? Seeing my reaction, Derek thought I was unwilling to sign. Frowning, he said, I know you like me. You won't find a better man than me. But what's the point of clinging to me like this? Marriage is about supporting each other until old age. If you get old and sick, I won't take care of you. You'll just suffer in your later years. What's the point? He wasn't wrong. I sneered. Yes, you definitely won't be there for me in my old age. After all, without the baby's umbilical cord blood, he'd live at most another year. Derek didn't catch the hidden meaning in my words. Instead, he nodded. Exactly. Since you understand that, just sign it. I'm not threatening you. If you don't sign, my mom and I will lock the door and go out for a walk, leaving you at home to think it over. If you end up losing too much blood and something happens to you alone, don't blame me. Pearl's eyes turned icy cold when she heard this. Yeah, a divorce benefits you, but being widowed benefits Derek. What do you think? Hearing this, how could I not understand? I quickly nodded. I'll sign. I picked up the pen, my hands trembling and the pain almost making it impossible to hold it. I wanted to wait for the pain to pass, but I couldn't help but show a bitter smile. You treat me like this, you'll regret it sooner or later. I'll watch you cry your eyes out. Derek had just been happy that I agreed to sign, but when he heard this, thinking I was making a last desperate plea, he instantly got angry. Regret? The thing I regret most is marrying you. Back then, Scarlet and I had a fight. She stormed off abroad, and out of spite, I chose to marry you through a blind date. But just because I liked you doesn't mean I loved you. I only needed a wife who looked presentable, could satisfy my physical needs, and help take care of the household. But the main reason was that you said you wanted to be child-free. I knew I would eventually get back with Scarlet, so I absolutely couldn't have children. After all these years of marriage, I deliberately lied to you about being allergic to silicone, made you take birth control pills, actually to ruin your body. But I didn't expect you to stop taking them on your own. I felt even more bitterly ironic. Is your first love really that great, worth risking your life for? Derek didn't understand what I meant by this, but Pearl nodded. Yeah, Scarlet is definitely better. She made a lot of money during those years abroad. She's the daughter-in-law I want. After marrying her, my son will become a man above men. Then she can give me a few grandchildren, which is 100 times better than that bastard you're carrying. I nodded and signed my name on the divorce agreement. You two have such beautiful fantasies, but unfortunately you'll never get the chance, because Derek. Just as I was about to reveal the truth, a phone ringing interrupted me. Derek answered, speaking in a tone I had never heard before, gentle and tender. Baby, she's already signed. We can get divorced tomorrow, and soon we'll be together. I lowered my gaze, swallowing the words I wanted to say. After signing, Pearl and Derek took out the luggage they had packed in advance, threw my phone back to me, and then left my house without a word. Judging by their haste to start a good life together, they only packed some clothes. They didn't take anything else, as if they wished they could sprout wings and fly away immediately. I called an ambulance myself. After the hospital examination, the doctor said the gestational sac and tissue had already passed, so there was no need for a dilation and curettage procedure. They only prescribed some medication to promote blood circulation, reduce bruising, and fight inflammation, instructing me to return for follow-ups in 1 week and 1 month, then sent me home. Back home, I lay in bed but couldn't fall asleep. My mind was a chaotic mess. A couple of months ago, Derek and I went to the hospital for a checkup. My results were all normal, but he was diagnosed with leukemia, and it was serious. I knew Derek was cowardly and afraid of death, and now that he had missed the optimal window for a bone marrow transplant, the only viable option was umbilical cord blood. Telling him this would only make him more anxious and nervous, which would only accelerate the progression of his illness. So I chose to keep his illness a secret, disguising the treatment drugs as health supplements and coaxing him into taking them. At the same time, I quietly stopped taking my short-term contraceptives, making a decision that went against my long-standing plan to remain child-free. I underwent ovulation induction injections at the hospital, and after more than a month of struggle, I finally got pregnant. I thought my sacrifice could save Derek, but I never expected it would end like this. Thinking about it now, I really find it laughable. I hid the truth to protect him, only for him to personally blow up his only chance of survival. If Derek and Pearl knew the truth, I wonder how they would react. Early the next morning, I was still asleep when my phone woke me up. I picked it up and saw it was Derek. I answered the call, and Derek's roar came through the phone. "Sophia, you've already signed the divorce papers. We made it very clear yesterday. Why haven't you come to the Civil Affairs Bureau to get the divorce certificate with me? Are you still trying to cling on?" I rolled my eyes, made sure I wasn't feeling unwell, and then said, "I'm on my way." By the time I arrived at the Civil Affairs Bureau, Derek and Pearl were already waiting impatiently. With them was a woman I didn't recognize. She was holding Derek's arm, looking down her nose at me with disdain, but said nothing. Judging by the look, she was probably Derek's first love, Scarlet. Derek furrowed his brows tightly, as if he didn't notice the pale look on my face, and said angrily, "Do you know how long I've been waiting for you? We're about to get a divorce, and you still have to rub it in my face like this? Do you think it's funny?" I didn't answer, but Pearl spoke up first. "I'm telling you, my daughter-in-law will only ever be Scarlet. If you know what's good for you, come in and get the divorce papers." I snorted coldly, "Isn't this all thanks to you?" Derek didn't feel the least bit guilty. Instead, he smiled and said, "Who are you putting on this act for? It's just a miscarriage. You're acting like you're dying. Did you even bother to put on some weak-looking makeup to get my sympathy when you came here? I'm telling you, it's impossible. Even if you died right now, I wouldn't be sad, I'd just be relieved to skip the divorce process." I wasn't angry, instead, I shook my head calmly. "Derek, the one who's going to die isn't me, it's you." As soon as I said this, Derek and Pearl immediately got furious. Their faces flushed red, and without thinking, they rushed over as if they wanted to attack. Scarlet grabbed both of them, one on each side, cleared her throat, and said in a sweet voice, "Auntie, Derek, can't you see? She's just stalling you. If you make a move, she'll definitely pretend to be dead and refuse to divorce. Don't pay attention to her, getting the divorce papers is what matters." Derek immediately stood still and said, "Scarlet is still the smart one." With that, he roughly dragged me into the divorce hall. Since the divorce agreement had been signed yesterday, it barely took any time today, and soon I had the divorce certificate in hand. Derek looked over the divorce certificate again and again, utterly pleased. Seeing that I hadn't left yet, Derek looked a bit puzzled. "Why are you still standing here? Get lost, don't dirty my eyes. I'm telling you, now that we have the divorce certificate, don't ever come looking for me again. We're done for good, understand?" I nodded, but before I could say anything, Scarlet lightly tapped Derek's chest. "Derek, what nonsense are you talking about? When we get married, we'll definitely invite your sister to witness our happiness. After all, if she hadn't gracefully stepped aside, how could we have gotten together so quickly?" Derek said nothing, but his expression softened considerably, as if he was daydreaming about marrying Scarlet. Seeing this, Scarlet grew even prouder. She came over to me, clicking her tongue twice. "Sister, I heard you just had a miscarriage. You really need to take good care of yourself, or else you won't be able to get married or have children in the future. Don't even think about blaming Derek for that. I ignored Scarlet and looked at Derek with a smile. Derek, do you know why I suddenly decided not to be child-free and want to have a baby? Derek was taken aback for a moment. Why? It was clear that both he and Pearl were genuinely curious because we had been married for several years, and I had always been a staunch advocate of being child-free. No matter how cute a child was, I had no interest. After hearing my question, Scarlet gave a pretentious smile. Derek, can't you see? She can't bear to let you go. You told me the day before yesterday that you wanted a divorce, but she announced her pregnancy first. Do you know what that means? Derek and Pearl exchanged a glance and both shook their heads. Scarlet let out an exclamation. It means she found out you don't love her, that your heart belongs to someone else. Women like her have seen this kind of thing many times. When they know their husband doesn't love them, they deliberately have a child to tie the man down. If you hadn't mentioned the divorce, she probably would have waited until she was too far along to have an abortion before announcing it. Derek suddenly understood and let out an "oh." He rubbed his chest. Good thing, good thing. Otherwise, I'd have been ruined by this bitch. If I suddenly had a child I didn't want, my life would be over. This woman is truly vicious. Luckily, fate is still on my side. Seeing the three of them looking so relieved, I couldn't help but burst out laughing. Maybe I laughed a bit too hard, making the three of them a little uneasy. After I'd had my fill, I finally spoke. Scarlet was right. I am indeed pregnant because of Derek, but not to trap him into staying married, it's so he can survive. Before any of them could respond, I pulled Derek's medical report out of my bag and tossed it into his hands. Because you're dying, the baby's umbilical cord blood is your only chance. But now, you're doomed. The three of them scrambled to look at Derek's test results. Pearl's face turned pale with fear, and Derek suddenly remembered he had never looked at his own hospital checkup results, having asked me to pick them up for him. At this moment, he was about 80% convinced. But Scarlet snorted coldly, Derek, this has to be fake. If you really had leukemia, she would have told you the moment she found out she was pregnant. Saying this now is just to scare you, to make you feel guilty and afraid. After hearing this, Pearl and Derek immediately relaxed, doting on me with angry glares. How dare you joke about such an ill omen? I'll kill you, Pearl said as she rushed over, threatening to strike. But before she could touch me, the police stopped her. Derek walked over to the officers, his expression agitated. Officers, you've come just in time. This is my ex-wife. She just deliberately cursed me, saying I have leukemia, and even forged these test results. This is definitely illegal. Please take her away immediately. Pearl quickly nodded. Even if it's not illegal, she must be crazy. Either lock her up or send her to a mental hospital, otherwise, what if she harms someone else? Scarlet chimed in, exactly, I'm a witness. I saw Sophia lose her mind with my own eyes. Look, this is a forged medical report. The police officer looked confused. Who exactly called the police? Called the police? Derek and Pearl exchanged glances. We didn't call the police. We just happened to see you guys, so we asked you to come and set things right. I quickly stepped forward to the officer. Officer, it was me who called the police. When I said that, Derek's expression was truly something to behold. You called the police? You called the police? On what grounds? What right do you have to call the police? I gave you the house, the car, even the savings, and you still dare to call the police? Pearl was trembling with anger. I knew this bitch had no good intentions. Officer, I didn't hit her just now. She's making a false report, wasting public resources. You should punish her properly. The officer looked at me. What exactly happened? Ignoring Pearl and Derek, I calmly told the officer, these two are my ex-husband and my ex-mother-in-law. Yesterday, they conspired to put abortion drugs in my soup, causing me to miscarry and nearly lose my life. That's why I called the police. Derek denied it without a second thought. It's fake, officer. She took the abortion pills herself to frame us. Of course, I knew Derek and Pearl would deny it, so I took out my phone. This is the surveillance footage from that day. You can take a look. It's almost laughable. I originally wanted to record everything during my pregnancy so that if Derek didn't survive, I could tell the child that their father had eagerly awaited their birth. Unexpectedly, I ended up capturing evidence of their crime. Faced with the proof, Pearl had no way to deny it and quickly said, "It was me. I did it all." My son had no idea. I just hated this daughter-in-law, so I did it. If you want to arrest someone, arrest me. It has nothing to do with my son. Derek hurriedly nodded as well. Yeah, I just asked my mom to make chicken soup. How was I supposed to know she'd drug it? After all, it takes two to tango. This daughter-in-law has her own issues. After a heated argument, Pearl was taken away by the police. I gave my statement and then left. To avoid Derek, I went straight to a postpartum care center and stayed there for a month. Although the doctor said I was in good condition, I wasn't short of money at the moment, so I was determined to give myself the best recovery. Once I was fully healed, I returned home, but barely an hour after I got back, Derek and Scarlet showed up at my door. It had only been a month since we last met, but Derek looked much more haggard and had lost a lot of weight. Judging by his appearance, he probably hadn't gone to the hospital for a checkup this month, and likely hadn't taken any medication either, otherwise, he wouldn't have changed so drastically. Derek looked at me with disdain and said, "Just drop the case and get my mom out quickly. You just want money, right? Name a number, and I'll give it to you." I didn't argue but instead asked him, "Money? Where would you get money from?" The moment I said that, Scarlet's expression clearly changed. She stared intently at Derek. Derek didn't notice Scarlet's reaction and smiled indifferently. "Even though I gave you all my savings, Scarlet has plenty of money. She loves me so much she'd be happy to spend it on me. So just say a number, and Scarlet will give it to you. Is that so?" I looked at Scarlet. "Any amount?" Scarlet ignored me and instead glared at Derek with a face ashen with anger. "You said you had no money, wasn't joking or testing me? You really have no money?" Derek was momentarily stunned. "Yeah, I gave up everything for you. Otherwise, that woman wouldn't have divorced me. She loves me so much, you know that. I used to have a salary, but to spend more time with you, I deliberately quit. This month, I've basically been spending my mom's retirement money. I've told you this before." Scarlet staggered a couple of times, almost falling. "I don't have money either." Derek started to panic a bit. He awkwardly glanced at me, then turned back and lowered his voice to Scarlet. "How could you have no money? Over the years, your social media shows you traveling all over the world every day. How do you travel without money?" Scarlet was choked with anger. That's work, I don't have any money." Derek took a long moment to recover from his shock. "You don't have money, then how can you live in such a nice house?" Scarlet rolled her eyes. "It's rented, how could I afford to buy a house? You clearly said on your social media that you now have a house, a car, and a high salary. I thought you were so successful that you chose to come back. I was a bit suspicious at first, but seeing you divorce so easily, giving up the house, car, and savings without a fight, I thought you had more money. I never expected you to be such a pauper. I don't care, you have to get the house, car, and savings back, or I won't be with you." I couldn't help but chuckle. That might not be possible, because the house and car were my premarital property. Although he always says he gave them to me, they were originally mine. I was just too upset before and too lazy to argue with him. As for the savings he mentioned, it's not as much as you think, only about 100,000 or so. At that moment, Scarlet felt like the sky was falling. "How is that possible? You're so beautiful and well off, how could you have chosen him?" I thought for a moment, because I didn't want to have a child, and Derek is so handsome, that's why I agreed. Didn't you guys check all this before you got together? Scarlet was so furious her face turned dark. She didn't say a word and just left. Derek looked at me, then at Scarlet, and finally decided to go after her. The next afternoon, Derek came to my house, looking dejected and no longer arrogant like yesterday. He glared at me for a long time before speaking. The house and car were bought before marriage, but since you married me, half of everything belongs to me. But I'm a good person, I won't argue about that. You just need to return all my savings, then withdraw the case and let my mom out, and I'll let it go. If you don't agree, I'll sue you. I don't care since I'm a man, but if I sue you, your life will definitely be miserable from then on. I rolled my eyes in my heart. The marriage back then was just to fulfill Grandma's last wish, and now that Grandma has passed away, how could I possibly remarry? But my silence made Derek think I was guilty. He changed his tone and said to me, "You're a woman too, you should have some sympathy. It's not easy for my mom to raise me all these years. How can you let her go to jail? And Scarlet, she's used to a good life. I have to have money to be worthy of her. Put yourself in my shoes, okay? You can't make Scarlet the same as you just because you can't have love yourself." I was too lazy to argue and instead took out the information I had curiously gathered about Scarlet. First, your mom went to jail because you couldn't admit to what you did, not because of me. If you really care about your mom and can't bear to see her suffer in prison, then turn yourself in and get her out. Second, the so-called good life Scarlet lives isn't as innocent as you think. You can look at this information yourself first. Seeing that I didn't seem to be joking, Derek reluctantly flipped through the information. After just a few glances, he got angry. "This is fake. I don't believe it." Derek's reaction didn't surprise me. Which man could accept that his goddess was actually a paid escort? Yesterday, when Scarlet said she traveled around for work, I found it strange. What kind of job is that so good? So, out of boredom, I investigated a bit. It turned out that Scarlet had despised Derek for being unambitious back then. To cross social classes, she chose the quickest way to make money. Over the years, due to illnesses caused by miscarriages, her health deteriorated. Coupled with aging and her business declining, she decided to marry a decent man. Derek was the best choice she could find, but what she didn't expect was that, like Derek, she was after the other's money, and neither of them happened to have any. Seeing Derek's crazed expression, I found it quite amusing and calmly said, "Derek, I've never lied to you about anything. If you don't believe me, you can ask Scarlet yourself." Hearing this, Derek shook his head violently. "No, last time you gave me a fake diagnosis at the Civil Affairs Bureau. This information must be fake too. I won't believe you, you're a liar." I shook my head. What benefit would I get from lying to you about having leukemia? Besides, this lie would be easily exposed if you just went to the hospital. What's the point of telling such a lie? Derek still frowned, seemingly unable to understand, so I continued, "Leukemia isn't a lie, and Scarlet's information isn't fake either. If you don't believe me, go verify it yourself. I have all the time in the world to accompany you, but your time is running out." Derek stared at me intently, but seeing that I really didn't look like I was lying, he stumbled away. I didn't know if he was going to the hospital or to confront Scarlet. After that, Derek didn't contact me again, but when I went to the hospital for one last checkup, I saw Derek there. He was holding Scarlet's hand, crying uncontrollably. "Scarlet, you love me, you heard what the doctor just said. The umbilical cord blood is my only chance. Help me, have my child. I promise I'll work hard to make money, I'll give you a good life." I stopped with interest to watch. Scarlet looked embarrassed. "Let go of me. We're just boyfriend and girlfriend, not married. Why should I have your child? Besides, I've been clear with you, I used to be an escort, I can't have children anymore, understand?" Derek let go of Scarlet's hand and grabbed the doctor's hand instead. "Doctor, please save me. I'm only in my 30s, I don't want to die. The doctor, overwhelmed, shook Derek's hand off. Derek, I explained it very clearly just now. Your condition is already severe. Even if your lover is pregnant now, it won't outpace your decline. I advise you to accept reality, eat whatever you want, do whatever you want. Scarlet heard this and disdainfully pushed him away without even looking back. Derek was utterly exhausted, physically and mentally, too weak to follow her, forced to watch her leave. Afterward, the doctor couldn't help but mutter, I don't know what's happened in the past month, your condition has worsened so fast. And I remember your lover was already pregnant before, how did she have a miscarriage? If your illness hadn't progressed so quickly, and if your lover hadn't miscarried, you might have had a chance. Watching Derek in pain, I felt a surge of satisfaction and couldn't help but laugh. Derek noticed me and hurried over in 3 quick steps, then knelt right in front of me. Honey, please save me, okay? Let's get back together. You can have a baby for me. We only need the umbilical cord blood anyway. After a few months, you can just induce labor, not a C-section. You don't want the baby anyway. Whether the baby lives or dies doesn't matter. As long as we're together. You're in the hospital now, isn't that proof you still care about me and want to reconcile? I can agree to that. Let's make up, release my mom too, and have our family back together. My mom and I will treat you well from now on. Trust me, okay? I rolled my eyes. We're already divorced, did you forget? And there was supposed to be a child, but you killed it yourself. Did you forget that? Seeing my firm stance, Derek nearly lost his mind. It was you. You hid my illness. If it weren't for you, I could have started treatment first, then found someone to get pregnant and waited for the umbilical cord blood. That was your responsibility. I'm going to sue you. I nodded. Go ahead. Not to mention whether you can even wait for the trial, even if you do, so what? On the day we divorced, I gave you your test results. You just didn't believe it. What can I do? I suffered through pregnancy for you, trying to find a way to survive. You're the one who destroyed your only chance, and now you want to sue me? Isn't this just madness? I advise you to listen to the doctor. Do whatever you want, eat whatever you want, and spend your final moments repenting properly. After all, this dead end is one you chose yourself, don't blame anyone else. After saying this, I strode away, while Derek, unable to bear the blow, fainted on the spot. After returning home, Derek kept calling and texting me incessantly. Growing tired of it, I blocked him completely. Half a month later, I received a call from the doctor. On the other end, the doctor sighed, Sophia, you're Derek's emergency contact. His condition is very serious, mainly due to psychological factors. His ability to cope is extremely poor. He has come to terms with his fate but still wants to see you one last time. Look at you, can you come over? Hearing the doctor's tone, I immediately refused. Doctor, I'm fully aware of the situation. I know Derek hasn't given up, and it's not as severe as you say. Did he threaten you with death to make you call me? The doctor didn't answer, tacitly agreeing with my suspicion. I smiled bitterly. I know Derek has contacted many reporters and media, waiting in the hospital room for me. If I go, they'll guilt-trip me into paying for his treatment, pressuring me to get pregnant quickly to save him with the umbilical cord blood. I know him too well, so I won't go. And I advise you not to waste your energy on him either. I was about to hang up when Derek shouted into the phone, honey, it's not like that. I called the reporters and media to help persuade you, not to guilt-trip you. A day as husband and wife is 100 days of grace, 100 days as husband and wife is deeper than the sea. You can't just give up on me like this. Since you're willing to save me once, you must be willing to save me a second time. All you have to do is provide the money to sustain my life, then do artificial insemination to get me pregnant quickly, I can still survive. Please, I'm begging you, save me. I really don't want to die. If I die, you'll be a murderer too. You're so kind-hearted, do you really want to carry the burden of my life? I rolled my eyes. Here we go again. I've made it very clear, you were the one who terminated the pregnancy, you brought this on yourself. It has nothing to do with me. Trying to guilt-trip me with this moral blackmail is really pointless. After saying that, I ignored Derek's pleas and hung up the phone. To avoid dealing with Derek's situation, I chose to stay out of town for a few months. It wasn't until the hospital notified me of Derek's death that I calmly packed my bags and returned home. Not long after I got back, Pearl's trial for injury was held. She took all the blame for Derek and was sentenced to 2 years. On the day of the trial, Pearl looked repeatedly toward the audience seats but never saw her Derek or her wealthy daughter-in-law, Scarlet. After Pearl was imprisoned, she couldn't get in touch with Derek or Scarlet, so she had no choice but to call me. Since I had nothing better to do, I kindly went to visit her in prison. Pearl glanced at me and asked directly, "Where's Derek? Why didn't he come? Didn't I tell you to notify Derek? I went to jail for him, and he can't even show up? How is that fair?" It seemed Pearl still didn't know about Derek's death. I sighed, "Then you're blaming Derek unfairly." "Of course, he wanted to come, but he just couldn't." Pearl frowned, "What do you mean?" "Because Derek is dead. I told you all at the Civil Affairs office last time, he had leukemia. I got pregnant to save him, but none of you believed me. After that day, he stopped going to the hospital and spent his time partying with Scarlet, which made his condition worse. He died last month." Pearl was stunned. "That's impossible. Even if the illness is true, Scarlet could still." I patted my thigh. "Oh right, Scarlet is actually a high-class escort. Derek thought she was after his money, but it turns out you're all the same, only in it for the money. So when you found out Derek was sick, you all ran." Pearl listened, growing more incredulous. "No, that can't be, no way." I didn't bother explaining further and pulled out a paper. "This is a copy of the death certificate. I brought it specifically for you to see. If you still don't believe it, that's fine. When you get out in a couple of years, you'll be able to see Derek's body yourself." Yes, after he died, no one claimed his body, it's still in the hospital morgue. Hearing this, Pearl rolled her eyes and fainted on the spot. Later, I heard that Pearl had a stroke and was paralyzed on one side, so she was released from prison. But I didn't go to see her. After all, I had nothing to do with them anymore. I just needed to live my own happy and fulfilling single life.